It's a conservative blueprint for, well, if they had it their way, how a U.S. presidency would look, recommendations across the board for the government.
It's a bold vision. They're not pulling any punches, that's for sure. I mean, they even go so far as to position this document as kind of a modern-day descendant of that famous mandate for leadership that had a big influence back in the Reagan years.
Talk about setting the bar high, right? And speaking of Reagan, it's almost like they're trying to recapture that whole, like, morning in America feeling. Because they paint a pretty, I don't know, maybe bleak is too strong a word, but a very clear picture of America today, a nation, in their words, facing decline.
Right. Echoing some of those same anxieties that were around, back in the late 70s, economic stagnation, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. They're not just doom and gloom.
Yeah.
They ooze confidence in their ability to turn things around their way, the conservative way.
They truly believe that those same conservative principles that were, the bedrock of the Reagan Revolution, limited government, individual liberty, free markets, those are the keys to getting America back on track.
It's a bold claim, no doubt.
Right.
So where do they see the biggest need for this conservative comeback? What's at the top of their to-do list?
Well, one of the most prominent themes throughout the document, and it's one that might surprise some folks, is the focus on the American family. They really see it as kind of the cornerstone of society. And right now they're saying it's in crisis, declining marriage rates, changing social values.
Right.
A whole breakdown of what they believe is, fundamental to a healthy society. But here's where things get interesting.
That's what I was going to say.
They're not just saying, let's get the government out of the way and let families figure things out. They actually want to use government power to, quote unquote, restore the American family.
That's not exactly the small government approach you typically hear from conservatives.
Right. It's definitely a more hands-on approach than some might expect. They actually suggest leveraging things like the tax code, incentivizing marriage, maybe even encouraging people to have more children. For instance, they talk about getting rid of marriage penalties that are baked into a lot of welfare programs. So couples wouldn't be penalized financially just because they're married.
Okay, I can see how that lines up with their philosophy, but they don't stop there, do they? I mean, they also talk about wanting to elevate family authority, and they even say they want to do it through government means.
Yeah.
Now that sounds, well, it's definitely open to interpretation, right? What would that even look like in the real world?
That's a great question. And to be honest, it's one of the areas where the document gets a little fuzzy. They don't really lay out like a step-by-step plan for how this would actually work in practice. It's more of like a guiding principle than a concrete policy proposal. Having said that, it definitely suggests that they're, open to using government power to, I guess you could say, reinforce more traditional family structures.
Okay.
Exactly.
So definitely some food for thought there. Lots to unpack there. And we're just getting started because this document, it goes deep, like really deep. It dives headfirst into basically every corner of the government. It's like they took this fine-tooth comb or maybe even a microscope to the whole federal bureaucracy. Yeah. And that's where you really see their thing about personnel is policy takes center stage.
Oh, absolutely.
They truly believe it's not just about the policies themselves, but who's actually implementing them.
It's about the people, yeah.
Yeah, and they're not shy about their critiques either.
Right.
Like they come right out and say, America needs a reformed bureaucracy.
Yeah.
They see the current civil service as this kind of bloated, inefficient machine. They argue that it's strayed from those merit-based systems of the past. Back in the day when people had to take those civil service exams.
Oh, right.
A real emphasis on qualifications and all that.
Exactly. They believe that by going back to that, by emphasizing skills and experience, maybe over some of the hiring practices that are in place now.
Right.
That's going to lead to a more effective government, a more accountable government.
And they don't just stop at these kind of general observations either. They go agency by agency, department by department, calling out what they see as the problems and offering their solutions. It is incredibly detailed.
Really is.
Honestly, it's a little overwhelming. I'm not going to lie. It's like they wrote the ultimate how-to manual for running the government. Where do we even start with this level of detail? Maybe we could pick a few like standout examples just to get a flavor for their approach across different parts of the government.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Why don't we start with the Department of Defense? They had some pretty interesting ideas there. Okay. One that really jumped out at me was this proposal to require all high school students to take the ASVAB,
The what, sorry?
The ASVAB, it stands for the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. Basically, it's the entrance exam for the military.
Oh, okay. Okay. So they want to make that mandatory for every high schooler. That's a pretty bold move. What's the thinking there? Is it just about, like, boosting recruitment?
Well, that's definitely part of it. They argue that if you give students a clearer picture of what military career paths look like, earlier on, that could lead to more young people enlisting. But it's not just about that. They also believe that even for students who don't end up joining the military, taking the ASVAB could be valuable. It can give you insights into your skills and aptitudes, what you're good at, what kind of career paths might be a good fit for you.
Interesting. So it's about giving everyone a sense of their strength, their options, whether it's the military or something else.
Exactly.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I could see how some people would find that really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I can also see it being kind of controversial. Some people might see it as pushing kids towards the military or putting undue pressure on them at a young age.
Right. It's complex.
It's a complex issue. But speaking of complex, let's move on to their ideas about the Department of Homeland Security.
Oh, yeah, because they don't hold back there either.
Not at all.
No, they're calling for some pretty significant changes. And one of the things they propose is to do a soft closure on what they deem to be ineffective DHS offices before potentially dismantling the whole department.
Whoa. Hold on a second. Dismantling Homeland Security? That seems like a pretty radical step. Like, what's their justification for that?
Well, they would argue that it's not about abandoning national security, but about making things more efficient, more streamlined. They believe that you can have, a smaller, more focused approach that's actually more effective.
Yeah.
And this soft closure idea, it's basically like a trial run. They want to demonstrate that the department can function, effectively with a smaller footprint, and then potentially down the line, they could move towards more significant restructuring.
So it's like a gradual approach, not just like blowing it all up overnight.
Exactly, a phased approach.
Okay, I see the strategy there.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not just talking about restructuring, right? They also take aim at USCIS.
Right.
U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. They actually call it an open borders agency, which those are pretty strong words.
Yeah, they don't mince words.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
So what specifically are they talking about there?
Well, they point to a number of policies that they believe have made it too easy to come to the U.S. illegally, in their view. For example, they're critical of what they see as loosened asylum eligibility requirements, parole requirements, things like that. They argue that these policies have led to an increase in illegal immigration, and they want to see a much stricter approach to enforcement. They talk about, really beefing up vetting processes, cracking down on fraud, that sort of thing.
So they definitely have some strong opinions about immigration and how it should be handled. But we've got one more stop on our whirlwind tour of this document. And it's a big one, energy policy. The Department of Energy, they really don't mince words about what they think the government's role should be, do they?
No, they do not.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear they want to see some major shifts in how the government approaches energy. And a perfect example of this is their stance on INTIER.
Okay, full disclosure, I had to look that one up.
Yeah, it's not exactly a household name.
Not exactly.
Yeah.
So for those of us who aren't energy policy wonks, what is EAR?
So EAR stands for the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office. And basically, it's the part of the Department of Energy that's focused on, energy efficiency and renewable energy, as you might guess.
Makes sense.
Right. But here's the thing. This document, it actually suggests getting rid of EAR entirely.
Whoa, really? Completely eliminate it.
That's what they're saying. And it's not just EAR, it's other departments too. Basically, they see these departments as engaging in this kind of picking winners and losers game within the energy sector. And they're fundamentally opposed to the government using taxpayer dollars to prop up specific energy resources.
Even if those resources are, renewable or energy efficient technologies?
Even then, they're really coming from this free market perspective. They believe that the government shouldn't be in the business of subsidizing any particular energy source.
So basically, their argument is, let the market decide what works best.
Exactly. Let the market forces drive innovation, not government intervention.
Interesting. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the family, the federal bureaucracy, defense, energy, and it's clear this is not just about, fine-tuning a few policies here and there. This is about a fundamentally different vision for how government should work.
Absolutely. It's about a different philosophy of governing. And you see it reflected throughout the document in all these different policy areas.
Yeah, you can definitely see those common threads. So if you had to sum it up, what would you say is the most important takeaway from all of this? What should our listeners really keep in mind?
I think the key thing to remember is that this document, it's not just about managing the federal government as it exists today. It's about fundamentally changing its direction, its role in American life. It's a bold vision, that's for sure.
It really is. And whether you agree with their ideas or not, it's important to understand where they're coming from, what their goals are.
Absolutely. Because these are ideas that have the potential to really reshape the country, for better or for worse.
Exactly. And at the